He was a man who believed deeply in perfection. From a young age, he had built his life with discipline, ambition, and clear expectations. He worked hard, achieved success, and earned respect from everyone around him. People admired his confidence and determination, but behind that strong exterior was a man who believed he deserved nothing less than the best. Especially when it came to marriage, he had very specific standards. He did not just want a wife, he wanted the perfect wife. In his mind, perfection had a clear image. He imagined a woman who was beautiful enough to capture attention without trying, intelligent enough to understand him without explanation, and graceful enough to carry herself with quiet elegance. He wanted someone who would fit perfectly into his life, someone who would enhance his image and complete the vision he had created for his future. He believed that after working so hard and sacrificing so much, he had earned the right to choose someone flawless. He often watched couples around him, silently judging and comparing. He would notice small imperfections and quietly convince himself that he was different, that his story would be better. He believed his patience would eventually reward him. Deep inside, he carried a quiet pride that told him he was meant for something special, something rare. But life, as he would later learn, does not always follow the plans we create in our minds. Sometimes, it sends us what we need, not what we want. And his journey toward understanding this truth was only just beginning. In his imagination, the image of his perfect wife was vivid and unchanging. He had created her in his mind long before he ever met her. She was someone who would walk into a room and naturally draw attention, not because she demanded it, but because her presence was effortless and graceful. Her beauty would be timeless, not just in her face, but in the way she carried herself. She would speak with calm confidence, never too loud, never too quiet, always balanced, always composed. But beauty alone was not enough for him. He wanted intelligence, someone who could understand his thoughts without him needing to explain everything. He imagined deep conversations, quiet understanding, and a connection that felt almost perfect. She would support his dreams, respect his decisions, and stand beside him as an equal, yet never challenge his sense of control. In his mind, she would never create conflict or complications. She would simply fit into his life like a missing piece he had always been searching for. He also believed she would be emotionally perfect. She would never disappoint him, never argue unnecessarily, and never fail to meet his expectations. She would always know what to say and what to do. She would bring peace into his life, not chaos. This image became more than just a dream. It became a standard. Every real person he met was silently compared to this imaginary perfection. And every time, reality fell short. What he did not realize was that perfection like this did not truly exist outside his imagination. But he held on to that belief, convinced that one day he would find her. As the years passed, many marriage proposals came into his life. His family, friends, and relatives introduced him to women they believed were perfect matches for him. Each proposal came with hope and excitement from those around him. The women were beautiful, educated, and kind. By any reasonable standard, they were more than worthy. But for him, they were never enough. He would observe them carefully, often in silence. He noticed the smallest details, the way one of them spoke too confidently, the way another laughed too loudly, or the way someone seemed too shy. These were not real flaws, but in his mind, they were enough to disqualify them. He compared every woman to the perfect image he had created in his imagination. And every time, reality failed to meet his expectations. Sometimes his family would ask him what exactly he was looking for. He would struggle to explain, because even he knew that his expectations were not entirely realistic. Still, he could not convince his heart to accept anything less. He believed that settling would mean betraying his own standards. He told himself that patience was necessary, that the right person was still out there somewhere. Meanwhile, time continued to move forward. One by one, the proposals stopped coming as frequently. People began to question his decisions, though they rarely said it directly. But he remained calm and confident. He believed he was simply waiting for the right moment, the right person. What he did not realize was that in his search for perfection, he was slowly distancing himself from something far more important, something real. Time moved forward quietly, but his expectations remained exactly the same. While the world around him changed, his vision of the perfect wife stayed frozen in his mind. His friends began to settle down, one by one, building families and creating new lives. He attended their weddings, watched their happiness, and listened to their stories. They seemed content, even when their lives were not perfect. But he convinced himself that he was different. He believed he was waiting for something greater. His family, however, began to grow concerned. They reminded him gently that life was not about perfection, but about companionship, understanding, and growth. They told him that no person could ever meet every expectation, but he listened without truly accepting their words. Deep inside, he believed that lowering his standards would mean losing control over his future. Sometimes, late at night, he would sit alone with his thoughts. A small voice inside him would question whether his expectations were too high, but his pride quickly silenced those doubts. He reassured himself that patience was a sign of strength, not weakness. He believed that one day, his patience would be rewarded. Years continued to pass, and the silence in his personal life slowly grew heavier. The excitement of new proposals faded. The conversations about his marriage became less frequent. Still, he held on to his belief. He did not realize that life was slowly preparing him for a lesson he could never have imagined. Because sometimes, life does not give us what we expect, it gives us what we need to grow. One evening, his parents called him into the living room. Their faces were calm, but their eyes carried a seriousness he had not seen before. They told him they had found a girl for him. She was from a respectable family, kind, and well-mannered. They spoke about her character more than her appearance. They described her as someone who understood responsibility and valued relationships. But as he listened, he felt no excitement in his heart. He asked to see her picture. When they showed it to him, he looked at it carefully. She was simple. Her beauty was quiet, not striking. There was nothing extraordinary about her that matched the perfect image he had held in his mind for so many years. She looked like an ordinary person living an ordinary life. He remained silent. His parents noticed his hesitation. They gently explained that perfection was not what made a marriage successful. They told him that kindness, loyalty, and understanding were far more important. They believed she would be a good life partner for him. He felt trapped between his expectations and his family's hopes. He did not want to disappoint them, but he also did not feel the connection he had always imagined. His heart was filled with uncertainty. This was not how he had dreamed it would happen. For the first time in his life, he faced a situation where he could not fully control the outcome. Life was presenting him with a choice, but it was not the choice he had spent years waiting for. He did not realize it yet, but this simple girl was about to change his life in ways he never expected. The first time he met her in person, his heart sank a little. She was polite and respectful, smiling softly, but she was not the image of perfection he had carried in his mind for so many years. Her dress was simple, her hair tied modestly, and her movements lacked the elegance he had imagined. She didn't have the commanding presence he thought a perfect wife should possess. As he observed her, his mind ran through 100 comparisons. Her laugh was too soft, her voice not refined enough, her gestures too casual. He noticed everything that didn't fit the ideal he had built in his imagination. For a fleeting moment, he wondered if this marriage would be a mistake. How could he be expected to give his life to someone who fell so short of his expectations? Yet, as he watched her interact with his parents, he saw her gentle kindness. She spoke with sincerity, never boasting or trying to impress anyone. She listened attentively, laughed at the small jokes, and showed a warmth that was quiet but genuine. It was not the perfection he had dreamed of, but there was something in her simplicity that carried honesty and integrity. Still, his mind struggled to accept it. He wanted extraordinary. He wanted flawless. And yet, in the way she carried herself without pretense, he saw a calm confidence and humility he had never considered before. For now, he could not admit it, but life had already begun to challenge his beliefs. The woman in front of him was not perfect in the way he had imagined, but she had a quiet strength, a patience, and a sincerity that would slowly, over time, make him question what perfect truly meant. This meeting was the beginning of a journey he never anticipated, one that would change his heart in ways he could not yet understand. Despite his doubts and inner hesitation, he agreed to the marriage. It was not a decision made from love or excitement, but from obligation. Family expectations, societal pressure, and the weight of tradition guided his choice. He stepped into the arranged engagement with a quiet sense of resignation. feeling as though he were surrendering a part of himself. The wedding day arrived, and everything unfolded beautifully on the surface. Guests smiled, rituals were followed, and the celebrations went on as expected. Yet, within him, there was a storm of uncertainty. He watched his bride walk toward him, her smile gentle, her eyes full of trust and hope. And all he could feel was a faint disappointment. She was kind, she was respectful, she was everything his parents had described, but she was not what he had imagined. Throughout the ceremony, he kept his emotions carefully restrained. He followed every ritual perfectly, spoke every word correctly, and appeared outwardly composed. But inside, he wrestled with conflicting feelings. Part of him admired her calmness and humility, yet another part resisted the reality of what life had presented him. This was not the perfect wife he had envisioned. It was someone else entirely, someone ordinary, someone unpredictable. Still, life moved forward. There was no turning back once the vows were spoken. He had married her, and the responsibility was his now. Deep down, he knew he had to navigate this relationship carefully, even if his heart had not yet caught up with his actions. What he could not foresee was that this very woman, quiet, simple, and seemingly ordinary, would gradually awaken emotions in him that no fantasy or imagined ideal ever could. She was about to teach him the most profound lesson of his life, that love, loyalty, and sincerity often surpass the illusion of perfection. After the marriage, he continued to remain emotionally distant. Though they shared the same home, he often felt disconnected from her presence. His mind was constantly searching for flaws, noticing every small detail that did not align with the image of the perfect wife he had built over the years. Her laugh, once charming in its simplicity, now seemed too quiet. Her words, once thoughtful, now felt ordinary. He found himself comparing her to the imaginary ideal he had created in his mind, and every comparison left him disappointed. He avoided spending too much time with her, keeping conversations brief and polite. When she tried to engage, he responded with a careful neutrality, making sure not to reveal the inner struggle he was experiencing. Deep down, he didn't want to admit it even to himself. He was not in love, and he feared that acknowledging any affection might make him vulnerable. Meanwhile, she carried herself with quiet grace, showing patience and understanding. She respected his distance, never forcing herself into his space or seeking approval through constant attention. Instead, she focused on small acts of care, preparing his favorite meals, maintaining the home, and ensuring that his needs were met. She never complained, never argued, and never sought to change him. Her actions were simple, but they were filled with sincerity, and her devotion remained unwavering despite his coldness. This phase of their early married life was a test of patience for both of them. He believed he was maintaining control, but in truth, he was beginning to witness a type of love and loyalty that he had never experienced before. Quietly, imperceptibly, his heart began to notice her presence, even as he struggled to accept the depth of his own feelings. Life was setting the stage for a lesson he would never forget, that true love often appears in ways that defy expectations, and it cannot be measured by perfection alone. Despite his emotional distance and constant scrutiny, she continued to treat him with unwavering kindness. Every day, she performed her duties with patience and sincerity, never showing frustration or resentment. She would greet him with a gentle smile in the morning, prepare meals carefully, and tend to the house without complaint. Even when he was cold or dismissive, she never allowed her disappointment to show. Her quiet devotion was not driven by obligation, but by genuine care, and it slowly began to leave an imprint on his heart. At first, he barely noticed. He had trained himself to observe faults, not virtues, and he expected her to falter, to make a mistake that would validate his doubts. Yet, day after day, she proved consistent. Her calm presence, her attentiveness, and her patience were a stark contrast to his rigid expectations. It became increasingly difficult for him to maintain his detached facade. There were moments when he caught glimpses of her sincerity, how she laughed softly when she thought he wasn't looking, how she carefully listened when he spoke, or how she quietly ensured that everything he needed was taken care of. These acts, small yet meaningful, challenged his preconceived notions of what a perfect wife should be. Gradually, He began to realize that love was not about grand gestures or flawless appearances. It was in the consistent, humble acts of care and the selflessness she exhibited every day. Unbeknownst to him, her devotion was slowly softening the walls he had built around his heart. He still struggled with his expectations, but the seeds of understanding and appreciation had been planted. The journey was far from over, yet life had begun to teach him a profound lesson. Perfection was not in what one imagined, but in the love, patience, and loyalty that could endure quietly, steadfastly, and selflessly. Over time, he began to notice the small, quiet ways she cared for him. She remembered details he had long forgotten, anticipated his needs before he even spoke, and offered comfort without asking for anything in return. Each action, though simple, carried an authenticity he had never encountered in anyone else. She didn't seek to impress him or gain his approval. Her gestures were natural, sincere, and selfless. At first, he tried to ignore it, clinging to his rigid standards of perfection. He reminded himself that she was ordinary, that she fell short of his ideal, and that no amount of kindness could make up for that. But her consistency and her gentle devotion gradually began to pierce through the walls of his indifference. He could no longer dismiss the way she moved through life with quiet grace, never complaining, never demanding, and always giving. He began to see her presence as a kind of support he had taken for granted. When he was tired or frustrated, she was there to offer a listening ear or a comforting smile. When life's small troubles weighed him down, she quietly alleviated them with thoughtfulness and care. It was not the dramatic love he had fantasized about, but it was far more enduring, far more real. Her actions began to awaken something in him, a slow, subtle appreciation for what she brought into his life. He realized that true love was not about perfection in appearance, cleverness, or flawlessness, but about consistency, empathy, and devotion. He began to see that she had been loving him all along, not for what he was, but despite his faults, his pride, and his inability to see the depth of her heart. Little by little, he understood that love's true power lies not in ideals or fantasies, but in the unwavering, patient care of someone who genuinely cares for you. One day, disaster struck. He fell seriously ill, suddenly and without warning. His body weakened, and his strength faltered, leaving him vulnerable in a way he had never experienced before. In that moment, he realized how fragile life truly was. For the first time, he felt powerless, unable to control the events around him or manage even the simplest tasks on his own. Panic and fear crept into his mind, and he longed for someone to be by his side. His friends were busy with their own lives, and his family, though well-meaning, could only offer advice from a distance. It was a stark reminder that life did not bend to expectations or social norms. Alone in his suffering, he began to understand the emptiness of relying solely on imagined ideals. For years, he had sought perfection in a wife without considering the strength, patience, and dedication required in real life. And yet, she was there. She never hesitated or complained. Day and night, she stayed by his side, tending to him with unwavering care. She brought him water, medicine, and nourishment, adjusting to his needs without prompting. She soothed his fevered brow, held his hand when he was afraid, and whispered words of encouragement when he doubted himself. Every action she took was filled with patience, love, and quiet determination. As he watched her tirelessly care for him, a profound realization began to dawn. The perfection he had always imagined, an illusion built from pride and expectation, was nothing compared to the authenticity of her love. In sickness and in weakness, she revealed a depth of character that no ideal could match. Her devotion was not performative. It was genuine, sacrificial, and unconditional. For the first time, he truly saw her, not as someone who fell short of his imagination, but as the person who had always been perfect in ways he had failed to understand. During his illness, she became his constant companion and unwavering support. Every day, from the first light of morning to the quiet darkness of night, she tended to him with a patience and devotion that seemed endless. She anticipated his needs before he could even voice them, ensuring he had food, medicine, and comfort. Even when exhaustion weighed heavily on her, she never complained, never faltered, and never allowed her worry to overwhelm him. Her actions were quiet but powerful, a testament to the depth of her heart and the strength of her love. He began to notice things he had never seen before. The way her eyes reflected concern without panic. The careful way she adjusted his blankets. The gentle tone in which she spoke. The soft hand she placed on his shoulder when fear or pain struck. Every detail, every gesture, carried sincerity, warmth, and selflessness. He had always been searching for perfection, but here she was, imperfect in appearance yet flawless in devotion, and it struck him profoundly. As days passed, he realized that he had underestimated her all along. The patience, resilience, and steadfast love she displayed were far beyond any ideal he had imagined. He had spent years waiting for someone who met his superficial expectations, yet what he truly needed was someone who would be there when life tested him, someone whose love would shine brightest in moments of weakness. In those quiet, intimate hours, he began to see her as more than just his wife. She became a lifeline, a protector, and a reflection of the kind of love he had never known. Her unwavering presence and sacrifice slowly broke down the walls he had built around his heart. For the first time, he truly understood that love is not about perfection. It is about devotion, loyalty, and selfless care, especially in life's most difficult moments. For the first time, he truly looked into her eyes and saw something he had never noticed before: genuine love. It was not the love of romance novels or imagined perfection. It was quiet, steadfast, and unwavering. In those eyes, he saw devotion, patience, and a depth of feeling that no idealized fantasy could ever match. Every small act she had performed during his illness, every gesture of care and concern, suddenly made sense. They were expressions of a love that required no recognition, no reward, no praise. Until that moment, he had been blinded by his obsession with appearances, intelligence, and perfection. He had been so focused on what she lacked that he had failed to see what she possessed in abundance: empathy, strength, and a selfless heart. And now, as he lay vulnerable and helpless, her love surrounded him, filling spaces he had never realized were empty. He felt a wave of emotion wash over him: gratitude, awe, and something more profound, an awakening of his own heart. He had spent years chasing an illusion, searching for a version of love that existed only in his mind. Yet here, before him, was something far more real and enduring. The woman he had once dismissed as ordinary was extraordinary in every way that mattered. It was a quiet, subtle revelation, not accompanied by dramatic words or grand declarations. It was in the way she adjusted his blanket, in the softness of her touch, in the patience of her gaze. It was in the countless sacrifices she had made without complaint. In that moment, he realized that love is not about perfection. It is about sincerity, dedication, and the willingness to stand by someone through every trial. For the first time, he understood the truth. The heart recognizes what the mind cannot always comprehend, and her love was a force far greater than any fantasy he had ever imagined. As he spent more time reflecting on her actions and her unwavering care, he came to a startling realization. True beauty is not measured by appearances or charm, but by the kindness and purity of the heart. The ideals he had long held, flawless looks, perfection in behavior, and effortless elegance, suddenly seemed shallow and meaningless compared to the depth of her character. Every small act she performed, from tending to his needs to offering comfort during his darkest hours, revealed a beauty far greater than he had ever imagined. He began to notice the subtle ways she expressed herself, not for praise or recognition, but simply because it was natural to her. The gentle patience in her voice, the empathy reflected in her eyes, and the warmth of her touch all spoke louder than any perfection he had envisioned. In that moment, he understood that he had been blinded by superficial ideals, chasing a fantasy that could never truly satisfy his heart. For years, he had dismissed her simplicity, her ordinary appearance, and her quiet demeanor as shortcomings. But now, he realized that those very qualities, her humility, her patience, and her genuine care, were what made her extraordinary. She had a strength and beauty that no imagined perfection could match. This awakening stirred something deep within him. He felt both shame for having judged her and gratitude for the lesson she had taught him without ever intending to. Love, he understood now, is not about finding someone who fits an image in your mind. It is about recognizing the soul of a person, appreciating their heart, and cherishing the selfless devotion that sustains relationships through trials and hardships. For the first time, he saw her clearly, not as the imperfect woman he had expected, but as the perfect partner in the truest, most meaningful sense of the word. With this realization, a deep wave of shame washed over him. He reflected on the years he had spent searching for a flawless wife, scrutinizing every detail, and overlooking the very essence of love that had been present all along. He felt guilty for judging her, for ignoring her patience, and for failing to see the extraordinary devotion she had shown. His pride, once so carefully guarded, now seemed petty and hollow in comparison to the depth of her character. He remembered the countless moments he had dismissed her gestures, the times he had focused on what she lacked instead of appreciating what she gave freely. Each memory now carried a sting, a reminder of how blinded he had been by his own expectations. He realized that he had measured love with the wrong standards, seeking perfection in superficiality while missing the profound sincerity of her heart. This understanding awakened something else within him: gratitude. Gratitude for her patience, for her unwavering care, and for the sacrifices she had made quietly and without complaint. He began to see that her love had been unwavering, even when he was cold, distant, or indifferent. Every act of devotion, every gentle word, and every small kindness had been an expression of a love far deeper than any ideal he had imagined. For the first time, he truly understood humility. He saw that life had given him a rare gift, a partner whose heart was perfect in ways he had never valued before. Her love was not about appearances or fantasies. It was about resilience, loyalty, and selfless dedication. In this moment of awakening, he acknowledged his mistakes and silently vowed to honor the love she had given him all along. The man who once sought perfection now understood that the truest beauty of a partner lies in the heart, not in an imagined ideal. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, his heart began to soften. He found himself noticing the small, meaningful ways she enriched his life, the warmth of her smile when he returned home, the quiet attentiveness in her eyes when he spoke, and the gentle care she gave without ever seeking acknowledgement. What had once been dismissed as ordinary now revealed itself as extraordinary. Each act of kindness, each thoughtful gesture, became a testament to the depth of her love and the strength of her character. He realized that his rigid standards had blinded him to the richness of her devotion. He had been so obsessed with an imagined perfection that he failed to appreciate the genuine love that had always surrounded him. Her patience, her selflessness, and her unwavering presence in his life began to melt away the barriers he had built, revealing a heart capable of gratitude and true affection. As days turned into weeks, he found himself longing to be near her, to hear her voice, to share in the quiet moments of life together. The resistance he had maintained for years began to crumble, replaced by admiration and respect. He understood that love was not about seeking someone who met a checklist of ideals. It was about recognizing the soul that stood steadfast beside you through trials and ordinary moments alike. Each time he reflected on her unwavering dedication, he felt a growing sense of humility and appreciation. The man who once judged, compared, and demanded now learned to value patience, loyalty, and quiet strength. He began to see her not as someone who was lacking, but as someone whose love had been perfect all along. In this slow transformation, he finally understood the truth. Perfection is not what life gives us. Love, loyalty, and genuine care are far more precious than any fantasy ever could be. Gradually, he came to a profound understanding. Perfection does not exist in the way he had imagined. For years, he had measured love against an impossible standard, seeking a flawless partner who could fulfill every expectation and mirror his own fantasies. Yet in her quiet devotion, he found a perfection far richer and more meaningful than any ideal he had constructed. He began to recognize that true love is not about appearances, accomplishments, or even intelligence. It is about consistency, empathy, and the willingness to stand by someone through every challenge. Her care, patience, and unwavering presence had endured all his indifference, pride, and unrealistic expectations. She had loved him fully, without demanding recognition, without setting conditions, and without seeking to change him. This realization humbled him. He saw how misguided he had been, how blind his pursuit of perfection had rendered him, and how much he had taken for granted. Each gentle gesture, each sacrifice, each quiet act of devotion she had shown began to shine in his eyes as a kind of perfection far beyond the superficial. He realized that the strength of a person's heart mattered far more than the perfection of their appearance or the charm of their demeanor. He also understood that life had given him exactly what he needed, not what he wanted. The partner he had once doubted, the woman he had dismissed as ordinary, had proven herself extraordinary in the ways that truly counted. She had taught him patience, humility, and the real meaning of love through her actions rather than words. In this awakening, he finally embraced a truth he had long resisted. Love is not about finding someone flawless. It is about discovering someone whose heart, loyalty, and devotion are perfect for you. In her, he found the perfection he had never understood he was searching for all along. The end, he realized the most profound truth of his journey. Life does not always give us what we expect, but it often gives us exactly what we need. The woman he had once dismissed, the one who did not fit his imagined ideal, had become the most invaluable presence in his life. Through patience, unwavering care, and selfless love, she had proven herself to be far more than perfect in appearance. She was perfect in essence. He looked at her now with eyes wide open, truly seeing her for the first time. Every sacrifice she had made, every quiet gesture of kindness, every moment she had chosen him over her own comfort, all of it revealed a depth of character and love that he had never recognized before. She had stood by him when life tested him, remained loyal when he was cold, and loved him when he could not love himself. Her heart had been the constant, steady force he had failed to value until now. It was then that he understood the real meaning of love. Love is not about finding someone who matches a mental checklist or fulfills an imagined perfection. Love is about recognizing a soul that complements yours, that stands beside you through hardships, and that gives without expecting anything in return. It is about patience, humility, and the willingness to see beyond the superficial. He had spent years searching for a fantasy, but life had sent him something far more precious, a partner whose love was true, unwavering, and transformative. In her, he found the happiness he had been seeking, not because she was flawless, but because her heart was pure, her devotion steadfast, and her love unconditional. At last, he understood that perfection is not a standard to chase. It is the quiet, enduring love that exists in the heart of someone willing to stand by you through everything. And in that realization, he found peace, gratitude, and a love deeper than he had ever imagined.